Thanks for tuning in to the Drive On podcast, where we're focused on giving hope and strength to the entire military community. Whether you're a veteran, active duty, guard, reserve, or a family member, this podcast will share inspirational stories and resources that are useful to you. I'm your host, Scott DeLucio, and now let's get on with the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Drive On podcast. Today, my guest is Dominic Teich. Dominic is a fighter pilot who started single seat mindset to guide goal-oriented individuals towards success using techniques and strategies that fighter pilots use on a daily basis through planning, execution, and debriefing and different things like that. So he's here today to talk about how to overcome the transition back into civilian life and what he did to get back on his feet after his own transition, coming back stateside after several deployments. So welcome to the show, Dominic. I'm glad to have you here.
Thanks, Scott. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background?
Yep. So I'm a dad, married, still to the same wife. So that's been pretty cool and uncommon nowadays. So I hear, and I got 4 kids. I started out in the civilian world flying airplanes, but then transitioned and got picked up to go through officer training school, and then went through all that training. And I've been in the active side of flight training in the military Air Force for 16 plus years now. And I'm teaching currently in the F-16 schoolhouse here in Phoenix, Arizona.
Cool. Yeah. And so that's actually kind of interesting how you started off on the civilian side and then got into the military, basically doing the same thing that you were doing on the outside as far as, flying. It's obviously much different planes and everything that you're flying, but you're kind of following that same kind of career path. How did you go about getting into the military from there? How did that come about?
Yeah. So I had gotten the itch as a young kid through, airships and what have you. And I just loved airplanes. So at 7, my dad and I built an F-4 fighter jet on the kitchen table for my birthday. And then at 12, I found myself standing on the flight deck, it was on Alaska Airlines. My uncle worked there as a mechanic, and he took me up to the flight deck as they were doing engine runs to test some of their work. And I just remember standing there going, holy smokes, this is a freaking coolest seat in the house up here. And then I fast forward to when I was 16, I signed up to go basically follow my uncle's steps, who's a Gulf War veteran, and then turn aircraft mechanic. And he's gone through some crazy veteran stuff too. But yeah, that kind of sparked that little flame that I needed. And I found myself signed up to be an aircraft mechanic and in that program. And there was a school counselor that handed me the last flyer at her desk for the flight school. And so my dad and I checked it out. And yeah, I started taking flight lessons. I didn't end up doing the mechanic track, and I just started chipping away. And by 18, at 18, I was hired to be a flight instructor. And so I just got to fly and teach people how to fly, like as I was finishing college. And then from there, I started applying to airlines as well as officer training school at the same time. And I got picked up by SkyWest Airlines, and I got picked up by officer training school at the same time. So I, kind of took the military route, thinking that, I probably won't get that opportunity again, but I can always go fly for the airlines again. So a little bit different route. I would say that, well, maybe not. There are not a lot, but there are some civilian pilots that then transition to the military. That's not super uncommon. I would say that most probably come from the Air Force Academy and ROTC, kind of as their bread and butter. And then officer training school is the way they explained it to me was it's like a faucet. If they need more pilots, they open the faucet up. If they don't, they close the faucet. The biggest benefit for those listening, if you have young whippersnappers that want to be pilots in the military, officer training school or officer candidate school, if you're going into the Marines or Navy, do they call it OCS as well in the Army?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So OTS or OCS, which are basically the same thing. You go get your 4-year degree and then you join after you're done with college. So you join as an officer with a 4-year degree, and those commissioning sources are the only ones you can go through that guarantee on your paperwork when you sign up that you're going to go to pilot training. It doesn't mean that you're going to be a pilot because you have to graduate, but ROTC and the academy services you don't have any sort of guarantee. And that was I knew I wanted to be a pilot, so I wanted to give myself the best chance. The downside is that I had, at 19 years old, I had $70,000 in debt. So there's the debt aspect, but I didn't want to take any chances. I knew I wanted to fly airplanes, so I was willing to go all in on that.
Well, it's actually part of the reason why I asked that question is because my son, he's 9 right now, but for years he's been obsessed with planes and flying, and like anytime we've gone on a vacation, like he's just talking nonstop, not about going to wherever it is that we're going. It's about we're going to go on a plane, and he's so obsessed with planes and flying and everything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he even gets like the flight simulator things on the computer,
Yeah.
and he's like flying the planes and everything. And he's telling me stuff that I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But
Yeah.
this is awesome seeing
Yeah.
you.
I was the same way.
Yeah, and hearing your story, I'm kind of like, this sounds like my kid, and like how he is so obsessed with flying and everything. It's
Well, if you
awesome.
really want to solidify that little root that is growing, is just sign them up for $150 or $200 incentive flight in a Cessna and go do a ride along with him, sit in the back seat and have him at the controls and have a flight instructor or somebody take you up. And it does not take that much planning other than just coordinating with a local airfield. You live here in Phoenix area, so like Goodyear Airfield, you could go there and do a little ride along. And man, I know that has my kids got the bug early on too, because I've taken
Yeah.
them up a few times.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna check that out because I think that is something he would just be so happy with.
Yeah.
We even just drive by the Air Force Base that's near us over here, and he just watches the planes taking off and landing and everything. He's just on cloud nine. No pun
Yeah.
intended there, but he's loving it, everything about it. So,
So it's funny is that that you found your passion and your purpose, because I also watch the airplanes too, taking off
Yeah.
and recovering. And I've been flying for like almost 22 years now. So I had got the bug early on, and it's always been there. It's just such a thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's an awesome career path too.
Yep.
Once when you get into it, and obviously passing all the training and stuff like that. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do.
Yeah.
But it probably shouldn't be either, because that's
Yeah.
kind of a pretty intense, dangerous thing to do. You want to make sure you got the right people up there in the sky.
Yeah.
So anyways, let's talk about your experience, your transition after your deployments. You came back home, you're back stateside, still in the military, obviously, but what were those transitions like, and what were some of the challenges that you were facing?
Yeah, so I think the pre-story or the before story is that, I started flying when I was 16, and I started going to college, and I was hitting it hard. I worked 3 civilian jobs. I restored a car. I was playing baseball through junior college. I was a civilian flight instructor, and then, just getting after it. And then I find myself in the Air Force pretty young, and I didn't have as many life experiences, but I had a lot more than a lot of the academy graduates. So, there were some things that I needed to up my game on, but there was also some other things that I had brought to the mix. But I say all of that because as I am in the Air Force, I find myself, struggling to learn some of those things that most people maybe should have, but I didn't, right? So there was a lot of people that, just knew that I was a hard worker, and they gave me a bunch of second chances, and that helped me grow. And I think the important piece of that is that if you're a family member and that somebody's kind of joined, there's a lot of like upfront stress, and the learning curve is super steep for those young guys in the military. So just giving them a second chance. And when you see, there were some things that I did, if I go back, I probably would have done differently, but it helped me grow. And some of it was painful. There was a lot of people that are just really patient with me and willing to, walk that path with me. So I say that because I had been at like a full sprint since I was 16 years old. And then I find myself as going through pilot training, which was one of the toughest courses I've ever been to. I'm just a lot of upfront, even though I had civilian experience, which helped me, there's just a lot of military stuff that you have to learn. And so, fast forward, I'm in a single seat fighter jet. I'm on my second deployment. That second deployment, I have my second kid is born, but I'm not there for it. The first deployment, we had been shelled 56 times. So I was kind of carrying that baggage with me. And then, just being defensive, what I found out is that when you're on the defense, when you're unable to be go on the offense, essentially, that affected me a lot more than my second deployment, where we were primarily offensive at the base that we were at, and, flying fighter jets and doing stuff. Now, all of it affected me in one way or another, but then you add just the nonstopness of life, getting married, like quote unquote, doing it all, right? Like I have it all. And then any new thing that comes in, I just add it to life. So I was that kind of guy. I just was like, let's say yes to life. And pretty soon life gets really heavy. and I get back stateside after a number of years and 2 deployments, and I think it was like over 30 temporary duty assignments just throughout the world, right? Like off of America's shores. And I'm back here in the schoolhouse teaching young guys how to fly, as an instructor, and I'm loving it. But I had also started a real estate investing business, and I started another business, buying and selling stuff. And I eventually turned that one off because it was too much for the family, but we kept the real estate. And I'm saying all of this because all of my life experiences and just the way that I was wired as a very action oriented person, I just kept piling stuff onto my plate. And even the bad stuff, I call it like my little trash can off to the side. I had this trash can, and I would throw the stuff I didn't want on my plate in my trash can. I'd slam the lid. And, years and years of suppressing that stuff. Some of it was subconscious, some of it was conscious. And then you throw in some family issues, and not between my wife and I, but just, what would you call that? Extended family issues. So brothers, sisters, dads, moms, aunts, uncles, that kind of stuff. Then one day somebody chucked a hand grenade in my trash can, and I'm standing there at the step desk getting ready to step out to fly, and I'm the instructor, and there's students on this ride, and this is not a day where I can be not on my game and not watching out and ready to go. And I just remember the pilot that was sitting at the desk, he's like, "All right, is everybody ready to fly?" And I just looked at him and I was like, "No." And it was like the first time in probably about 16 years of flying airplanes where I was just, maybe it wasn't that long. Maybe it was like 12, 13, 14 years. I'd have to go back and look. But I just remember saying, "No, I'm not ready to fly." And I had never done that before. And that was just, I was like, "Well, what?" Like, of course, everybody's just like, "What the heck is wrong with you, dude? Are you going crazy?" And I'm like, "Yeah, like, yeah, I am. And I don't know what the hell is wrong, but I don't like this. I don't know what's going on." And now granted, I think the straw that broke the camel's back was we were having some extended family issues. And that was kind of the thing that made everything surface, right? Because we were finally back home, finally back to what we thought was kind of normal and back around family. And then, that added with the stresses of deployment and being away and just a lifetime of suppressing all that stuff. Mm-hmm. I now found myself there just going, what in the heck is going on with my brain? So that's the backstory to, one day just kind of going, I'm not right. And here's the tricky part is that sometimes it can be male or female. I'd say that more predominantly it's maybe a male trait, especially like a type A male trait. You find this a lot in police officers, firefighters, any military dude in general, right? They're like, "No, I got this. I was trained to do this. I'm a machine. I got this under control." But how do you train a person to have that introspection to go, I'm not, I don't know what's going on. And that takes, in my case, a complete gut punch and to just drop me to my knees. And unfortunately, I think that's probably the case for a lot of us. I don't know. You deal with this a lot more than I do, Scott, but maybe you can fill in a little bit on that.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, and first off, just from kind of outsider looking in on the situation, it seemed like you said no for the first time ever, almost, at that one point when they're like, "Is everyone ready to fly?" And you're like, "No." But you had all this other stuff going on in your life. You had several businesses. You had, in addition to your job as an instructor and flying and everything else that you're doing, plus add on family issues. We all have family issues of to some degree. We may not have them right now, but eventually there's going to be things that happen with your family. There's going to be deaths in the family. There's going to be family drama. There's stuff will happen over time, right? But it seemed like all of that stuff in your situation was kind of all just happening at once, pretty much all in the same time period, or if not exactly at that same time period, it just was building up to a point where you were like, "Okay, this is enough. Like, I can't do it like this anymore," right? That just
now that I think of that, I think more likely is that I had always been at a full sprint saying yes to everything, that I had never really kind of started to jog. And I had hit a point in my life where, my school debt was paid off. I had a business that was making money. I started to jog a little bit, right? And started to like go, well, what does it mean to like be a dad and to be present and to do all this stuff and how do I slow down? And as soon as I did, that's where some of this stuff started to come to the fore. And then, like I said, I think that the kicker is that I had never slowed down and never given myself that chance to slow down. I had always just been on to the next thing, right? Which I think that is it's a good character trait as long as you're not a workaholic. But I had become a workaholic. I was, 12 to 16 hour work days were that's just what people did. In my mind, that's what I did. And that's what I thought that everybody did. But man, was I wrong. Like that's not a sustainable lifestyle to be doing that for so many years, and then add on a business and add on the stress of, a property under renovation and money going out and like managing all these different things. And then like to forget too about the wife and the kids and just home life and everything. Right. Which it's tough. So I think it was not necessarily like it. Yes, it all kind of hit me at once. There were some, triggers, not like the triggers nowadays where somebody's hair is out of style or whatever and it triggers you. Like, no, like an actual real trigger, not these like wrap yourself up in a little ball and go to your safe space triggers that a lot of call them soft millennials have nowadays. But there was a lot of that, right? So it was just, I had never slowed down. And so I think that if I was listening to this and I knew somebody that had never slowed down, there are some things that like you can't, a lot of times if you're telling that person to slow down and stop, it's going to make them want to run harder. Because I'm a reverse psychology kind of guy. Like especially if you tell me that my business is going to fail, it will succeed just to prove you wrong. I had my flight commander in officer training school he washed out. So he failed out of pilot training, and he was this disgruntled, chubby little dude that was mad at life. And he did not give me a good review. Now, granted, I had some learning to do in officer training, and I wasn't like the superstar of the class or anything, but he told me that I probably would not make it through flight training. And so to prove him wrong, I was like, he didn't know that I had already civilian flight instruction. I took most of the awards and I was the distinguished graduate out of my pilot training class, more or less just to prove him wrong, right? Just to not give any chance of that being true. And so like those types of people, the type A peak performers that are just sprinting at life, that's a tough nut to crack. We can talk about how my support group, as well as specifically my wife, some of the things that she did that really helped me during that time.
Yeah, for sure. And I definitely want to get to that aspect of things too. But the visual that popped in my head when you were talking about all these things that you had going on and basically not saying no to anything and just wanting to do more and go harder and harder on all of these things. The visual is, you ever see those people who are spinning plates on like a pole and they got the plates spinning and, getting one of those to spin is pretty hard. But then once you get once when it's going, it's kind of self-sustaining and it goes, but then you get the second one and the third and fourth, and you get 10, 15, 20 of these plates going, and you're running around trying to make sure that they're all continuing to spin. And that's the visual that I had. Is like, this is who this was. It was this person who's running around like crazy, trying to make sure all the plates stay up and none of them come crashing down. But eventually you're going to get tired. You're going to get burnt out. Something's got to give. And it could either be the family life, it could be the businesses, it could be your military career, it could be any number of things that you had going on, any one of those plates, if you will, that you had spinning could come crashing down. And, fortunately, it wasn't to that extent, where you had 20 actual plates spinning around and you're literally running around trying to do all of that. But it was probably a situation where you felt like you just had to keep going, because if you didn't keep going, something was going to just come crashing down. And that's not the type of place that you want to be in, especially in a, kind of high stress environment that you might've been working in as an instructor, as a pilot, and that type of thing. You don't want that level of intensity going on all the time.
Yeah. The lesson of that story is if you're going to have plates spinning, hire plate spinners. And so that's what I started to do after I started, and we can get a little bit more into this, but as I started, pulling myself back up by my bootstraps, I started, for my business side of the house, I started putting people in to the positions that, I needed to pay to do that because it was too much. Right. And then I think it was in your book, right? So the one you sent me, by the way, thank you, Surviving Son, right? So I don't remember, it was maybe about halfway through. I think you had come back from a deployment and then you were dealing with some life stuff. But as that happens, it's just, you're still in the mix, right? And you don't have time to process your own life.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what was happening to me is I was on a hamster wheel, just full sprint. And, yeah, plates are spinning out of control. And then one comes crashing down. And then you add a couple more things in there, which is life in general.
Yep.
And, it just gets to be a little bit too much
For
at
sure.
times.
Yeah. So let's go back a little bit and started mentioning, about how you kind of got back on your feet and how,
Sure.
your wife and, people in your life helped you out and got you through the situation.
Yeah. So I think the thing that really helped me was not necessarily, so I'm a Catholic Christian. I was a very poor Christian back then, but about 2 years ago, as of this recording, I had I don't know, you call it a reversion to Christianity type of thing. So that was definitely missing in my life for sure. It was something I believed in God and I believed in all that stuff, but I didn't think it was necessary. Right. But there's a lot of, and I think that's a very commonly accepted worldview nowadays is, I don't know if outside of atheists, a lot of people are like, yeah, I believe in God, but I don't think he's necessary for my life type of thing. So once that really helped about 2 years ago, but way prior to that, as I'm starting to pull myself back up, thank God, my wife, she's not one to nag. She always had her faith in the background and she was, I would say whether I know it or not, she was praying for me. And there was a lot of other things going on in the background that, at that point were helping. Like I said, I did have a kind of a humiliating, I guess, because I was I've got to keep it together type of guy. But the thing that helped me was when I said, I'm not okay. That was what helped me. Now, granted, you can't get somebody to say that. They have to say it on their own. So that's the tricky part. But then once that happens, there were a lot of people that, when I said, hey, I need some help, there were a lot of people outside of the VA even, right, that were a lot of help. And there's so many different programs now that are run by private organizations that are just absolutely fantastic. And I'm not going to plug any specific one, but that's when a lot of that stuff started coming out. And then, there were the military chaplains, they just really sat down and just were willing to listen. Right. And that's what they get paid to do. But that really helped me get back on my feet and just to talk through, what the heck is going on in my mind, as well as, hey, this is my past, and just rambling on for months and months. Right. What the heck, trying to make some sense of it. And then, there were two chaplains that I remember specifically. And again, this is when I was Christian in name. Mostly because the other stuff that I had tried out didn't work. So I at least knew that Christianity was there was something to it. But a lot of these chaplains had a Christian background. So they were bringing in biblical references and they were bringing in stuff that I had never really delved into because I hadn't given myself the time to do that. So the people off to the side, right, that weren't directly listening to me fall apart in counseling and that kind of stuff, my wife specifically was not nagging me. She was there. She just, knew that I was going through stuff and she just was there, and it took a long time. It took a long freaking time to get back on my feet. Now, granted, life was still trucking along. I was still doing something. I didn't have this victim mindset where I'm just going to lay down and die. I'm a fighter. I'm an action taker. So I was doing things, but probably for the first 6 months, I was just I was in a bad place. And probably by the end of year 1, I started to see some of the things come together. I wasn't going to counseling as much anymore, but I did realize that was super helpful. And then, in that second year, I went to some counseling with my wife, which also was painful because it was now that person being pulled into it. And so just fighting through that in the second year. And then by the third year, I started to kind of catch my breath. And I'm saying that not to dissuade anybody, but just to kind of give a general idea of this brain stuff, right? When you start to lose it a little bit and the screws get loose and the machine starts coming apart, especially if it was a high performance jet engine, you get some bolts loose, fan blades start shredding apart and the whole thing blows up. So I think that the lessons that I learned from all of that was it's okay to go, hey, I don't feel quite right. And then to, meet with somebody and just talking it out, especially the personal, darker stuff in your life, that was definitely tough to work through. But then also realizing that it does take time. It's not going to happen overnight, especially if you're like me. I'm pretty impatient. And I just wanted to I wanted to fix it and move on. And it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and it's hard to slow down to talk about the issues that you're going through when you're worried about keeping all those plates spinning and everything else that you have going on in your life. And it's like, well, I want to talk about this, but I got to go do that other thing too.
Yeah.
And you got all this other stuff. So you kind of have to force yourself to just like slow down and take things one step at a time to get your head right, to go through the process, to get through whatever it is that you're dealing with. And it's hard sometimes too, especially like when you're saying that you brought your wife into, some of the counseling and stuff like that, where it's like you don't want to necessarily drag those people into all of the crap you're going through. But
Mhm.
at the same time, I know if your wife is anything like mine, like she was there for me 100%. And she was just kind of the same way that you described. Like she wasn't nagging me, oh, you need to go get help. You need to go do this. You need to do that, whatever. She was there for me to support me in whatever way she could. And if that meant that she needed to go and sit in an office and listen to me vent about whatever it is that I'm going through, she would have done it happily. And
Yeah.
she would have been there for me no matter what. And it wasn't like I was burdening her with this. It was she wanted what was best for me. And that's what she would have done, for me. And I'm sure that's the same thing with your wife. And, I can't obviously speak for everybody, but I know that there's other people out there who probably feel like, oh, I don't want to drag so and so into
Yeah.
this. Well, it's not dragging them into it. It's them being there to support you and help you through whatever it is that you're going through.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that you and I are super fortunate to have the women that we're married to in our lives because my wife does share that same personality or characteristic trait to just sit there and listen, to not fix, just to like listen, right? I don't have that same skill. I'm getting better at it because I'm a fixer. I want to like take action, like, well, I don't like it when just people sit around moaning and complaining. And sometimes that's how I view those situations. So,
I think that's a guy thing in general,
yeah,
because I don't know that I've talked to any guy who's like, oh, you know what? Let's just sit and listen. That's a muscle that needs to be trained in a
yeah.
lot of guys.
Yeah. And
So
you can learn it. I'm not, by no means am I good at it, but like I've gotten better.
yeah,
But I would also think that something that is of value that has really helped me is my Christian men's group, because sometimes life is super heavy and the person that you're trying to, the couple's life is already such a important thing, especially in our society where it's not valued that highly. And family life and your wife and your kids, like those are important things. And bringing that extra luggage, weight, baggage into that relationship could cause your relationship to fall apart. So that would be the only caution that I have with that, which is why for the first at least year, I wanted to kind of get my own crap in order. And then from there, I could then go, okay, so how have I not been nailing it as a husband for so many years? And then
right.
going through that pain. And I knew it was gonna be a painful thing because if there's gonna be any problems in our relationship or in our marriage, it's me. Because I'm gonna say something. I don't like pop off or anything. We don't yell at each other, but like, I'm just a go-getter, right? And that tends to, there's not a lot of people are not wired like, and that tends to create some hurt feelings at times with the way I go about things. But I'm getting better with that.
Sure.
It is heavy sometimes. So, whether that's the military chaplain, there's military counselors. So even if you are, you don't want to make it about religion or whatever, there's other people that have those skills and that are just readily available. Your church group or a men's group or something, like your dudes that are around you that that you can vent to. Man, that has been one of the biggest helps for me in my life, is to just, like, if I have something that's heavy on my heart, taking that into the men's group and be like, dudes, I freaking can't stand what is happening right now. Like, what do we do with this issue? And then another one, almost probably 90+% of the times, one of the guys in the unit or in the group will say, yeah, dude, I'm going through the same thing. Or, because there's in my group specifically, there's some military guys, there's a police officer, there's other fighter pilots, and then there's just regular old dudes that are civilians that have never been in the military, and they just bring a different perspective, and then I don't have to bring that luggage into my marriage. I can share it elsewhere. I can kind of get it figured out. And then if I want to, I can talk about it with my wife, but that's not something that she doesn't need to burden, or I don't need to burden her with that.
Well, and after you've talked to someone about it too, sometimes, especially someone else has gone through something very similar, like you were saying in your groups, that you guys talk about things, and a lot of times you'll probably figure out what's going on, and you might, not all the time will you figure out
Yeah.
right then and there, but you may be able to think about things a little bit more clearly after you've heard someone else's point of view and their perspective, and you get to think about it a little bit more. And that way it's not you going to your wife and just dropping this bomb on her
Yeah.
and saying, I got this terrible situation going on right now, and I don't know what to do about it and all this stuff. Not to say that you want to necessarily hide things from your spouse either, but
Sure.
after you've had the opportunity to talk about it with somebody, think about it in a clear, level-headed kind of way, then if you do decide that you want to talk about it with your spouse, then you can go to her and say, hey, I was talking to the guys in the group about XYZ topic, whatever it was, and this is what we kind of came up with, and what do you think about this, and that
Yep.
kind of thing. And that way it's not like she needs to be worried about you and
Yep.
all that kind of stuff, so you're not burdening her in that sense, from my perspective anyway.
Yeah.
I don't obviously want to put my thoughts into your own situation, but to me it doesn't seem like it would be as much of a burden if it's something that's already been kind of discussed. Like, I know
Yeah.
in my personal experience, I've gone to therapy through the VA and things like that, and after a session, after I've talked about whatever it was that we were talking about, I'll talk to my wife and be like, yeah, this is what we talked about, and this is kind of the thought process that went into it, and what solution might exist for whatever this problem is. And then she's like, oh, okay, that's cool, thanks for letting me know, and all that kind of stuff. So it's not like I'm going to her like, hey, you need to drop everything, I need help with this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a difference there, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think you bring up a good point, is that every couple's gonna be different. Every couple is, newer in the relationship, or older, or more experienced, or gone through different things, right? And then
Sure.
sometimes life just deals you that curveball that hits you right in the side of the knee and just drops you, and there's nothing you can do about it. But figuring out that communication piece is super important. And at least what works in my relationship, and probably not for all, is going, hey, I'm going through this stuff right now, and this is what I am doing, and this is the pattern, and this is kind of how long I think it will take to move through this. I appreciate your support. Here are some things that I can share with you. Here are some things that I'm working through that, like, I want to kind of get my arms around before I start bringing that in. And that was tough for me to do, because I was always I got it under control guy, right? Like, I got this. And then being able to say, you know what, I don't got this right now. I do need a coach. I need somebody to counsel me and to, like, help me out with this. And I love you. And because I love you, I'm going to go unload on that person. Because if I'm coming home every day dropping a freaking A-bomb in the house, and all these F-bombs, right? Like, that's not helpful. So let me get my A and F bomb squared away, and then I can come home and just be here for you and be present. But just realize, and I do this in business too. So that helped me in my business, that helped me in my professional life, that helped me as a dad, to just sit down and go, hey, this is coming up. It's out of the norm. And here are some of the things that I'm going to expect, but here's the end date. This isn't forever. So, hey, let's row in the same direction. It's be a little uncomfortable for a little while, and then it'll be over, and we'll go back to more of like an even keel type life. But there are going to be those ups and downs, and just communicating that and being on the same page as much as you was helpful.
Yeah, communication is huge, I think, in any relationship, whether it's your spouse or even in the military. Communication's huge. If you're
Yeah.
not communicating with people, then you're not getting the right information at the right time, and things go sideways that way. But I think the best part about the communication, especially in a relationship with like a husband wife kind of relationship, is that you then have somebody who can act as an accountability partner there, where if you're like, okay, I'm working towards this goal, I know there's an issue, and I'm doing XYZ steps to get to this end result, they can be there not to nag you to do that, but just as a reminder. It's like, hey, do you think that's really going to help this situation? And
Yeah.
kind of help you out in that way too. That's definitely a benefit that's there. And again, it's not the right thing for every couple, not every
Sure.
relationship, but it could be.
Yeah.
But even if it's not, we're talking before about these other groups that might be available
Yeah.
through church or other organizations that you might be a part of, where you can chat with those people and they can be the accountability partner. But
Yeah.
but
I
again,
mean, there's so many. Yeah.
all revolves around communication, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many resources. My uncle, the Gulf War veteran uncle that I was telling you about, that is now working for Alaska Airlines, I met up with him for lunch, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. And he sent me a link to a Facebook group that was Gulf War veterans only type of thing. And so whether that's on Facebook or social media or whatever, where you just get on there and just vent, right? And then go, hey, like you and I, we live in the same neck of the woods. I didn't even know this, right? Like the internet connected us, and it's like, hey, you live right up the street from me, and this
Right.
in a small world. So and that wasn't a connection that we made through church or through the military, it's through the internet, just, randomly. So there are so many different outlets and things that you can do. And then just kind of understanding too, I think the thing that I learned is I tended to compare my situation with other people. And I guess the lesson I learned there was it is all right to be in your own foxhole taking grenades, and that's how you process your own life. You don't have to go, well, Jeff is in a huge graveyard and there's like a tractor dumping dirt on him, and I'm over here in my trench taking grenades. It's like, well, no, don't compare people. It's okay to just go through your own crap and get yourself back on your feet. So you can just have a crappy day.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, like sometimes coming home, instead of just being like, I had the worst day of my life, right? Like if you tell that to your wife every single day, that's not going to work out, right? At some point we need to start seeing some things. But what I would say is something like, I had a really rough day. I had a rough day. And a lot of times I didn't know what it was, Scott. Like those subconscious triggers that something happens, maybe somebody does something, slams the door, what have you. It happens during the day and it just triggers you into this like bad mode. And it's kind of just identifying those and realizing that takes time. But then you get home and you're just like, I had kind of a crummy day and I don't feel good right now. But that doesn't mean that I need to be an asshole to everybody that I live with. Right.
Right.
So but vocalizing that and just being like, hey, I'm having a rough day, and that goes a long way. Even if you don't want to talk about it, just to be like, that's okay. You can have your own crap. You can be, just in the trenches taking grenades that day. And sometimes you do, and then crawl out of it and run over to another area that you're not getting shot at.
Right. Exactly. And reiterating what you just said, it's okay to have a bad day. We all have bad days every now and again. Some days we have great days. Some days we have terrible days. Like there's, you wouldn't be living life if it was all just kind of static, like everything, like that wouldn't be like experiencing life in general. But you're right. We all have bad days, and some people's bad days are worse than others when you look at things. But at the end of the day, someone who drowns in 12 feet of water versus someone who drowns in a foot of water, they both still drowned.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. They both had a bad day. Like we don't need to compare. It's like, oh, well, that person drowned worse than the other one. Like it doesn't, no, it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. They both had the same end result, a bad day. And so it doesn't do any good to compare one person's bad day versus another person's bad day. It doesn't do any good there. So, just look at it as, okay, well, yeah, we had a crappy day and let's try to move on and do what we can to improve tomorrow. So that way tomorrow's not a crappy day too,
Yeah. And you kind of said something that like, I don't know how much more time we have, but like I know that there's probably a lot of people going, well, how? What do I do and how do I do that? The action takers, right? That are like,
sure,
I want to get back on my horse. I know something wasn't correct, but like as I started going through counseling and doing things, every person is different, but you'll start to do things and you'll start to see that some things help you more than others. And for me, it was choosing to go to bed early. That was one of my biggest helps because then I could wake up refreshed. And if I chose to go to bed early, I wasn't like an alcoholic. That's what every alcoholic says, right? I wasn't an alcoholic, but in all seriousness, like then you don't stay up and binge watch Netflix and you don't have, a couple extra beers and you don't, you know what I'm saying? So like, not only do you get better sleep, you wake up refreshed. I was waking up earlier. And when I woke up earlier, I had quiet time in the morning. So I could like get my thoughts straight and just sit still for a freaking moment. God forbid you just sit still and like process what's like happening right around you. So going to bed early and then not even necessarily like waking up early, but you're going to wake up refreshed and then getting some of that time in the morning to yourself, and call it selfish, call it whatever you want. It's necessary. And that helps you with your intentionality throughout the week. That allows you, if you want to pray, you can do that. You can sit in silence. You can, meditate, you can stretch. And I was doing all of those things, right? And I found that just going to bed early, that I could make that decision. I could make the decision to stay up later, to drink, to have a couple extra drinks, to do whatever. Or I could just go, hey, you know what? I'm going to go to bed at this time and we'll get the kids to bed and then we'll go to bed. And
Mhm.
that started this whole, now granted, there were other things that I did before that, counseling and everything, but those were like the simple little things, like one step at a time. Okay, I'm going to just get more sleep. Like, and when you get more sleep, you're more rested and you're more ready to tackle the challenges for the next day. And maybe, if you're one that likes to just go crazy and party on the weekend, then you're not having the headaches and the hangovers and all that stuff as you're going into Monday, when Monday is normally a bad day, right? Like, and you're just trying to like get back on the horse. So those were like my small action steps: was go to bed early, wake up refreshed. And that started, I started working out more, stretching, meditation, eventually prayer, like, and then just having some intentionality throughout my week, so that everything didn't seem like a complete explosion in my face, like, so to speak, every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that going to bed early, or at least having a kind of a standard time that you try to go to bed,
Yeah.
of course, life happens and you're not going to be able to hit that mark every single night. But if you have all these wild fluctuations, like, you got to wake up early in the morning for work Monday through Friday. So, okay, we're going to go to bed early, Sunday night through, whatever, through the week and everything. And you're going to do that. But then the weekend, like you're saying, you might want to go out and party and you stay out till 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever it is. And you're going to be tired the next day.
Yeah.
Saturday morning, you're going to be tired. Sunday morning, you're going to be tired. And
Yep.
then come Monday, your body's starting to get used to that staying up till 2 o'clock in the morning. You're not going to be able to get to bed at the time that you want to. Yeah. And then Monday's going to suck, like it does for so
Yeah.
many people. They're like, oh, I can't believe it's Monday. Monday sucks, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
whatever. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
If you keep a consistent schedule and try to just stick to that, your Mondays will actually probably get a little bit better.
Yeah.
And it won't be quite so bad. So let's talk about your books. You sent me a few copies as well. You got Single Seat Wisdom, Single Seat Gratitude, and you sent the Single Scratch Pad as well. And I got these here for anyone who's watching on YouTube. I'm showing them up to the camera now. But tell us a little bit about these books that you have and what they're all about.
Yep. So the single seat series essentially is, we're single seat fighter pilots. So that's kind of where that came from. Is it's a different perspective that a lot of people don't get to have, but we've essentially leveraged that into some of my business stuff. The books that you're holding on to are ones that we started with Single Seat Mindset, that company, but I also wrote a book for my real estate investing company called Single Seat Investor. So that started first. And like I was talking about earlier, typically stuff happens in like one step at a time. So like, go to bed early, right? That's step one. Wake up at a decent time refreshed, right? Like step number two. So that's what I was doing after kind of getting back on my feet. Is I started to experience some small wins every single day, and those added up over time. And, Single Seat Investor was the first one. And then the two, Scratch Pad and Gratitude, those are just low content books. One's a scratch pad. It fits in a flight suit. It's a soft cover little book you can take notes in. And I found that just writing stuff down helped me get my thoughts on paper. And then Gratitude was huge too. At the end of the day, hey, what am I grateful for? Just reminding myself of that. And that's just a little book of quotes and some inspirational stuff. And then Single Seat Wisdom, that series of books, volume 1 and 2 at this point, they're in each one of those books, there's 20 stories from fighter pilots, and they're just sharing their perspective on life with a short little like soundbite of wisdom at the end. And all the chapters are written by a different author. I just compile them all and get them to publishing. And all those authors actually contribute to the Children's Cancer nonprofit as well to be a part of this project. So it's kind of a double whammy for them. I'm asking them to do work and give money to a cancer foundation. And so far we have 40 people that have taken the plunge on that. So we have right now 40 fighter pilots. And I was talking to a retired F4 fighter pilot the other day, and he actually committed to the first chapter in volume 3. So the Single Seat Wisdom series of books it's just a different perspective from fighter pilots that isn't aviation related. Sometimes it is, but a lot of times one of the chapters is written by a guy that had his wife die from cancer. And, it's just his perspective on that, on, hey, if you're going through stuff in life, just realize that somebody always is going through something worse, not to compare it to them, but just realize you can get back on your feet. So I'd say right now, we do have a bunch of other books that we're in the process of writing. One of my favorite ones that I'm looking forward to is called Single Seat Mindset, which is our company name, but that's for the 8-year-old to 18-year-old age group, right? And it's kind of a, hey, if you want to go somewhere in life and you're an action taker, like I was at that age, what are some of the things that can set you up for that? Like if you could have a 1, 2, 3, what does that look like? So we're in the middle of writing that, but I'd say Single Seat Wisdom, those books are the most impactful right now. And they're a series too. So they're, each year we're going to try to crank one more of those out around Veterans Day.
Yeah. And so this episode's coming out a little bit after Veterans Day. I know we're recording it a few weeks beforehand, but so we have the Single Seat Wisdom. Volume 1 is out already. The next one should be coming out shortly. Probably by the time this episode is released, it should be available. Where can people go to get a copy of these books?
Yeah, so we've consolidated everything into one spot at singleseatmindset.com. That's we'll call it the launch pad. You can go there. We have other resources that are free. Obviously the books, they're for sale through our links and on Amazon and stuff like that. But we give all of the proceeds to a children's cancer nonprofit. So you get to learn from a different perspective of fighter pilots, but then know that the money is going to a worthwhile cause. So singleseatmindset.com. And if your listeners have listened up to this point, I don't do this on every podcast, but singleseatmindset.com/podcast gift. The first 3 people that go there and sign up, I'll send them a signed copy of Single Seat Wisdom for free. There's no strings attached. Yeah. So singleseatmindset.com/podcast gift. It's all one word, all lowercase.
Awesome. Yeah. And so I'll put that link in the show notes. So if you've listened to this far through the episode, definitely go check it out. It's a free book, no strings attached. And like you said, the money, if you do end up buying the book, the money goes to support children's cancer charities. And that is just a awesome thing to be supporting anyway. So not only will you get the wisdom from 20 plus fighter pilots, depending on how many copies of the book you end up getting, not only are you getting that wisdom, but you're also helping out other people who are going through their own difficult times in their lives. And so, you can feel good about that as well as you go about getting the copies of these books. So thank you for sharing all of this wisdom, if you will, with me and the audience. Really happy to have you on. And anything else that you want to add before we close out here?
No, thanks for having me on your show, Scott. I'm looking forward to finishing the copy of the book that you sent me, Surviving Son. I'll be honest, I haven't finished it yet, but I'm well the way through it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And yeah, looking forward to hearing more about, what you have going on in the future, because I know these books coming out, there's always awesome stories that come out, with these stories and in these books, and it's going to be pretty cool. So I'm looking forward to following along and seeing what you have going on. So thanks again for taking the time to join us today, and looking forward to catching up and learn more about you in the future.
Sounds good. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks for listening to the Drive On podcast. If you want to support the show, please check out Scott's book, Surviving Son, on Amazon. All of the sales from that book go directly back into this podcast and work to help veterans in need. You can also follow the Drive On podcast on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts.